Hey there! Today I'm going to be talking about our cyanotype prints using our symbolic objects. Carefully open up the black envelope and save the tape so that you can reuse it to close it up again. Take one of your pieces of cyanotype papers, cut it into 4 squares, and do that inside to control the light. We'll be using these to test our exposures. It shows a few of the same objects that I used for my photogram, but also a few items from nature as well. Once you've cut your test strip, now it's time to get started outside. So you need water, your black envelope, your objects, and a phone for a timer. When working in the sun, you're going to want to work very quickly. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set up your 4 test strips, placing your objects on top of those test strips spread out however you want to. Set your timer to about 20 minutes. Make sure to move everything out of the sun except for your 4 cyanotype test strips. And once everything is set up, your timer is set. Now you're just going to wait for different intervals of time between each different exposure. At 2 minutes, I'm going to be removing my first test strip very carefully and placing it into the water to remove the developer. Once placed in the water, it removes its light-sensitive material. Remember, it's sensitive to light, so you want to make sure you always keep it in the black bag when you're not using it and out of the sun. At 5 minutes, I'll now place my second test strip into the water and begin the development process at the 5-minute exposure mark. Once I place the cyanotype paper into the water, I then agitate it in order for it to get completely developed. I use my hand, but from my experience, I recommend instead rocking your container, allowing the paper to smoothly move back and forth, because I actually ended up wrinkling and folding my paper unintentionally. To continue to learn from my mistakes, I also forgot to write down the exposure times on the back side of the print. I did bring out my Sharpie marker in order to do that. I also brought out my scissors, but only as a paperweight. I do recommend cutting your cyanotype papers inside. Now that 10 minutes has passed, I'm going to carefully remove my third exposure, this time remembering to document the time on the back and then agitating it in the water. Again, I do recommend agitating the water container, not the paper itself. At 15 minutes, I place my last exposure into the water. It only takes 5 minutes of water time for the development process. So here you can see that at different exposures, you're going to get a different variety of values. The more light you expose, the darker your print. And I actually liked it dark, so I'm going to go with 18 minutes. So once you figure out which exposure you like best, now it's the process of making your final cyanotype symbolic print. So this is where you're going to want to use the full-sized 6x6 sheet of cyanotype paper, organizing your objects and laying them out exactly how you want them to look for your final design. Oh, and a quick side note, you'll also notice that I set everything up in the shade, and then once it was all complete, I placed it into the sun. I ended up changing my objects. I did not like the way my Pez dispenser was looking, so I decided instead to use objects from nature. That's another benefit of making the test strip, is it allows you an opportunity to view what your objects are going to look like before you make your final cyanotype print. You'll also notice that I used a sheet of glass that I had in my garage in order to hold down the items in case there was any wind. This will also help to stabilize and keep everything still during your long 10 to 20 minute exposure. On overcast days, it may take longer. On bright sunny days, it may take less time. That's why we make our test strips, our 4 exposures first, to test out how bright or how dark we want our cyanotype print to be. If you don't have glass, you might want to consider placing objects in a Ziploc bag and then securing the bag down with rocks or paperweights. After my 18-minute exposure, I then placed my cyanotype paper into the water for my 5-minute development time. Again, I do recommend agitating it and rocking it back and forth rather than moving it around with your hand like I am doing. It did create a lot of wrinkles. After your 5-minute development time, let it sit and dry for a good amount of time before pressing it between 2 books to flatten it out. With your test strips and your final print, you should be using 2 sheets of cyanotype paper. We will be using the remaining paper for our next photo assignment. So there you have it. That is the process for making a cyanotype print. As you can see, it's fairly simple, so hopefully you enjoy it. I thank you for watching. Have a great day.